Okay, great. Let's get the show on the road. Greg, if you just want to confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, absolutely, Gabriel.
Okay, great. Excellent. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. I'm Gabriel, Management Executive here at First Digital, a first technology company. We're very excited to host today's event. We got a pretty full house of subscriptions for this webinar, so very excited to give you guys a solid overview of Microsoft Fabric, which we really see as a game-changing data and analytics platform that seems to have bring together all of the aspects of data, methodology, and self-service reporting on the Microsoft stack. For those of you that don't know, First Digital is a first technology company, and we focus on digital workplace, Power Platform, low-code and full-code solutions, integration, generative AI development, and as you'll see today, data solutions. Quick bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded, and we'll make the recording available to all of you on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll share those details after the event. So please feel free to refer a colleague to it who might have missed today's session. Due to a pretty big size of today's audience, we've put everybody on mute, and we ask that you post any questions in the QA window in your Teams client, and we will either answer those questions in the Q&A window during the session or during the dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's session. In case we don't get to everybody's questions, we will reach out to you directly afterwards to try and address any questions that we didn't manage to get answered. In today's session, Greg Verbiger and Stefan Ossink will share basically decades worth of experience in planning and executing data-driven projects. Stefan started his data career back in 1998, and he's got a wealth of experience in ERP data management, gathering data from custom-built solutions and getting those reported on data platforms and analytics. Stefan spent many years at PPS, who is a business, as we know, who's very much dependent on good data quality. Stefan heads up our data architecture team now in the First Digital business since 2003. And Greg is the head of our data at First Digital. Greg's also got a very colorful history of training and mentoring data experts, and he has worked for clients all over the world. He's a bit of a legend, actually, and is best known for saving the day on some very large-scale Microsoft SQL deployments for clients ranging from stock exchanges to logistics companies. And we're really honored to have the two of them host today's session. They will cover the Fabric stack end to end, also focus a little bit on some of the licensing questions that you might have, cover some of the migration options available from Power BI or Power BI license solutions, and obviously give you full insight on how to plan your own roadmap on Microsoft Fabric. And I guess without any further ado, Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Hi, guys. I see we've got a pretty full house to take us through this Microsoft Fabric presentation. I will present for you just the overview and the architecture and a bit of a deep dive into the end-to-end of Microsoft Fabric based off a slide deck, and thereafter Stefan would actually go and show a more pragmatic demo in terms of Microsoft Fabric. So I'll just share my screen. So, and many of you know me from many years ago. We started BI in the 1950s or 60s, some of us. And traditionally, we had a business intelligence environment where we would have something very similar to what I'm showing here, where 5 different areas in which we worked on BI. We always had a source coming in. We always had some kind of ETL integration layer, SQL Server integration services or SQL scripts. We always had some kind of a warehouse, still very similar, you know, Snowflake or Star Schema warehouse. We had some kind of analytics. A lot of you would remember that we had analysis services, which arrived in the year SQL or the year 2000, and it was very different to today. But fundamentally, in data science, it's very similar on those algorithms that we have back in the day. And then we had some kind of a reporting. The popular tool was very definitely SQL Server reporting services. And I can mention they're not deprecating it yet, although we now have paginated reports in Power BI. However, that's kind of the history. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago, really. It was the other day that we had this. And it moved so quick in the world of AI and BI that 2 years down the line, this picture might look even a bit different. So our topic of today is Microsoft Fabric. So I kind of drew a little wall with a little platform at the bottom to show you that this is a unified end-to-end analytical platform they've provided for us now, in which we can unify data, in which we can then analyze that data and stage it to analyze, and then of course to report on it going forward. So that's exactly what Microsoft Fabric is. It's just designed to make our life easier, bringing all the data, bringing all our tools, bringing everything in analytics and data into one unified environment that of course runs on this SaaS platform. And that's very important, that SaaS platform, software as a service. So it's all web-based. It's within one environment. We can do end-to-end from source, ingestion, to analytics, to Power BI, and. And that's really what Microsoft Fabric is all about. Good. So to start off with, I'm going to start and talk a little bit about the source side of things. Now, Stefan would be giving us a bit of a demo in terms of the source. Right. Now, it's quite an amazing world. Currently, we're standing on about 200 native connectors that we have to ingest data into the Microsoft Fabric OneLake, which I'll talk about now. So there's really one for every single data source that we may have. I mean, whether it's Azure services, things like Azure Cosmos DB, the data lake storage, Gen 2, all those, Azure blob storage, those binary large objects that we would have, videos or whatever we're streaming in, those event hubs. Of course, traditional databases we would have still to connect to SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, and so forth. We would have other cloud platforms, which is quite important. So we can have sources like AWS S3, I'm thinking Google Cloud Storage and all that. Then, of course, we still have the very popular files, JSON, CSV, and. SaaS applications like Microsoft Dynamics 365, Salesforce. We have real-time data that we can pull via the Azure IoT Hub. And then, of course, we would have things like REST API, I see down here, REST, so that we can pull from some kind of a REST API environment. So over 200 sources. So I don't think we have a real problem there. Of course, we can also pull from on-prem, SQL Server, and so forth. Now, and this is what it kind of looks like when you kick off to connect to a data source in Microsoft Fabric. So back to my little diagram that I'm showing here. Now, the first aspect, what I said was everything is under this one umbrella, is something called the OneLake. Now, the OneLake is, think of it like OneDrive. It's kind of a holding area that holds all the data, whether it's structured, whether it's non-structured, whether it's semi-structured, whether it's raw, whether it's so, normalized, whether it's denormalized. It holds it into one area for us, the OneLake, and it's a unified area. Now, what would be important for you is you see OneLake there. Is this Delta Lake format. Now that's interesting because the way that the format of the data is held in OneLake is via the Parquet format. Now, again, I'm just taking you back about 10 years ago when SQL Server 2016 arrived. It may have been 2012 even, where they introduced for us, in place of just row indexing, we could do column store indexing. In other words, we could take data, and in place of then storing it like name, surname, age, we could say store that as a cluster together in a column, so that when we query some kind of a data, we would find that that data all clustered together. So it was 92% faster, they claimed, in order to do that. Now, the Parquet format that I speak about here virtually works the same. It stores data as opposed to rows. It stores it in and organizes into columns. And that's how the Parquet format works. So in other words, when we find data, we find the whole Greg figure. It's not like just, my address is here and my date of birth is there and so forth. So that's important, one lake Parquet format. And then the second aspect of the Delta lake format is that Delta smart layer that they've placed there for us. And many of you would know that already. You would remember that in order to keep track of changes in like a data warehouse, we would have like slow changing dimensions and tables we would write these changes to and log it. We would have like transaction logs in which we would log changes. Now, this is what the Delta layer does. It's kind of like the manager of this whole one lake for us. And it uses a transaction log, and it records for us like an update, a delete, any one of those data manipulation bits of information. It also applies, many of you would know this as well, the ACID transactional approach, which is atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability. In other words, it keeps it all intact for us, that when we ingest into this one lake over here, we have kind of got a manager that will ensure that we have consistency and so forth. And that's the data one lake. I can quickly, and there you can see what it would look like in Microsoft Fabric. Again, Stefan would go in a bit more detail over here for you. Now, in between the data source and the one lake, we have this ingestion layer. Think of integration. Think of ETL. Think of ELT. Think of all that, because somehow we need to get this information from the sources into the one lake. And yeah, Microsoft have provided, under the auspices of Fabric, so many tools, so many familiar tools for us to do that. For example, there's SQL scripts. I'll start with that. Something you guys know very well. Copy into. There you would see it. It's normal transactional SQL, a dialect of it. It's something we use to copy into and so forth. We could use store procedures. We could use triggers. We could use views to do that. However we want to ingest that. So that's SQL script. We also got something called the flagship, the Azure Data Factory. Now, this would look familiar to many of you because it's kind of like a very better version of SQL Server Integration Services, which gives you a graphical user interface to drag and drop these objects, to get some kind of extraction, to maybe do some kind of a sanitization or transformation or massaging of the data, and then to load that if you go on the ETL model. And this is included within the Microsoft Fabric stack. And I think, again, it's something that's pretty popular amongst the ingestion of the data into the data lake. And there you guys can see it. There's something you guys would know well, data flow gen, very similar, extract, transform, load. So typically over here, we would extract data. If we need to transform it, we would transform it and we would load it. Again, it's a graphical user interface that we have over here. Then I can just mention one more, this notebook script. So within Azure Data Factory, you've also got this notebook script that I can use. It looks like that. Now, this opens up a whole new world to us, because within every single one of these layers, from source, ingestion, data warehouse, analytics, and reporting, we can use notebook scripts, which is kind of based on the Python language. Notebook scripts. We can use it within a Azure Data Factory. For example, let's say we're getting in-flight data coming in the Azure Data Factory, and I can use a notebook script to go and just ensure things like data consistency, things like duplication, things like completeness of data. I can say, oh, just go have a look at this guy coming in here, whether it's the complete data that I've got. And then based on that, it will return something for me that I can just carry on in flight before I persist it into one lake. So it's a very powerful tool that they've provided for us to create these notebook scripts in a language that we would know, Python language. And that's really the highlight of the ingestion there. I'll talk about event streaming now. So what do? What am I talking about? We have all our different sources. We've created these workflows in ADF and these integration of the data into the one lake. We've got our one lake sorted. We've got our environment set for reporting. Now, we can report directly, of course, with direct query from Power BI into the one lake. We don't, we can report directly from there into the one lake over here. Or, this is also very important, we would then create what we call a data warehouse, which is something you people would be familiar with, those that have worked on it. If I just click on that little icon to show you what it looks like, and it will be a very familiar environment for you. It looks very similar to what it looks in SQL Server, doesn't it? It's got our table objects, it's got our views, our functions, our stored procedures. We can create triggers. We've got our dimensional tables. We know that a warehouse is dimension tables against facts, against the measures that I want to measure against a dimension. We have our relationship in this model, in the semantic model over here. So it's very similar to what we used to. So within the Microsoft Fabric environment, we can then create a data warehouse, still using the old Kimball methodology or whatever you guys are using, star schema, snowflake schema, and we can prep data specifically for reporting, specifically to get analytics out of it. So that's also part of this Microsoft Fabric data warehouse over here. So another very important aspect of the Microsoft Fabric, and which they've now given us, is this analytical one. I just want to talk a little bit about event streaming. Now, event streaming is real time. Event streaming is also derived from the old complex event processing, which was, I think, in 2008, release 2 of SQL. They introduced this complex event processing for us, which basically means that you have some kind of a source in which you, when it goes in flight, you then monitor this in-flight data, you then interject and you make certain calls to it, like now we can do it in Python and Notebook. We would make a call if some anomaly is found, and then based on the anomaly that's found or what I'm looking for, it will then take a decision for you to redirect. A good example is the 6060 guys that come and deliver food for us. It might be that we're pulling in-flight data from the Weather Bureau, and then we're saying, right, okay, so the roads are flooded. I'm getting it in real time. And then we would redirect, based on that real time, we would redirect the driver to go via Johannesburg, to Centurion, type of thing. And Microsoft Fabric then supports this event stream. We use also Notebooks Python to do that. So you will have in-flight data. It's before it even persists. It's before it goes and lands within the lake or anything. You would have it in flight. You would write these events where you want to go and monitor for it, and should that event occur, then it would redirect or do some kind of a automated action for you. And that's event streaming. So from source all the way through to the right. Then very briefly, I want to touch on analytics over and above what I've just spoken about. We also have this data engineering, data science, real-time analytics. That's what I really spoke about. We have AI as well, Copilot, which coincidentally now is in every SKU. It doesn't matter if you've got an F2 SKU or you've got the bigger guy, the Copilot has been added to that. So if I just take data science, for example, Right. And here is where we build, train, and deploy machine learning models. That's what we do. So we say, right, I want to do a predictive analytics, and I've got my data prepped for it. So I want to see, by association, you guys would remember, I want to see if I buy, or the people that buy brandy, what is the most likely product they would buy with brandy? And it'll probably be lemonade, as an example. But we have to prep the data. We prep our environment for them. It's called learning. Just like we teach our brains to, learn every day how we, respond to things. We do it with data science as well. Right? We've also got data engineering, and I want to mention something else. What Microsoft Fabric does, it gives us an opportunity for so many roles. If you're just a data engineer, you've got a place within this environment. If you're just a data scientist, if you're an analytical guy, you've got a place, and there's some tool you can use in this end-to-end, wall-to-wall AI, analytical platform that Microsoft has given to us. Data engineering, I'll just quickly show that to you guys, and so forth. We've got AI down at the bottom. And that is just a beautiful world. It's part of your licensing, which I'll quickly chat about before I hand over to Stefan. Then on the right is Power BI. Now, I probably find that 90% of you know Power BI already. An amazing graphical tool that we use. They've moved it under Microsoft Fabric. If you look at the licensing as well, you can still have it as a standalone with a Power BI service, but this is where we kind of put it all together. We provide these graphical rich reports for business to analyze this data, whether it's historical, whether it's yesterday, and whether it's things that happened last week, hindsight, whether it's insight, what's happening now, or whether we're doing foresight, whether we're doing what's going to happen down the line. Power BI is the tool that we use for that. And that's just a topic on its own. So very briefly, this is the end-to-end Power BI, not Power BI, the Microsoft Fabric platform. I want to mention one last thing before I quickly talk about the licensing. Down at the bottom, you see Entra ID. Now, that's a very important one. Entra ID is the old Active Directory services. It works on that Kerberos. It works on that process of issuing a token. So we've got that incorporated within the Microsoft Fabric environment. That's Entra ID. The data activator, they've given us this in order to, for example, I'll give you a silly example. It can check for me where the stock levels drop below a certain amount. So if I'm doing the 60-60 and people are ordering bread, and I want to see at a store, listen, if that bread goes down below 10 loaves of bread, can you go and quickly bake another 20 for me? That's data activator. It kind of sits back and it waits and it pulses and it kind of says, okay, if the stock levels drop, I'm going to activate some kind of action. Purview, very briefly, I'll touch on Purview, which is a topic of its own. That's a very important one under data governance. Purview is provided for us for like data cataloging, like lineage, sensitive data, protecting data that cannot be seen by everybody, like our salaries or like, my marital status that I don't want people to see per se. I can protect it, and it does it on encryption. So Purview is used end to end to encrypt and protect data. I can think of Papia as well, the protecting our personal bits of information, and end to end. That is what Microsoft Fabric is about. So if you think about it, it's source, it's ingesting into this one lake, which is that unified platform for us. It allows us still to create data warehousing geared for metrics and analysis. It's got this whole analytical environment in which you can flourish to do forecasting, insight and hindsight reporting. It's got this event stream for real-time reporting and real-time actions and event streaming. And then it's got Power BI under that. Now, let's quickly, before I hand over to Stefan, quickly talk about the licensing. This is a topic of its own, and probably 140,000 questions would come around the licensing. I can briefly just mention. So when I look at Microsoft Fabric, there's 3 areas where you're going to pay for licensing. The one is the storage on OneLake. Again, these are not the actual figures in dollars, but I've used just as an example numbers that are pretty close, or it could vary, it could change in the slide deck. But down at the bottom here, I've got storage. There you can see it's probably the cheapest of the lot. No, not probably, it is the cheapest. So that's the storage over there. Okay. Now, the second portion is the capacity. So this is kind of like the backbone of this whole licensing model, and it's called capacity-based licensing. And capacity-based licensing, you have 2 choices. You can either do it pay as you go, like you do at Vodacom and MTN, and you pay, as you use the data every month. You pay hourly. You can pause at any time. You can select any one of those options of SKU licensing. You can scale it up. You can scale it down. It's kind of like on a usage basis that you've got this licensing, and then you've got reserved, which is where you beforehand determine what your capacity usage would be, and you then say, I'm going to commit for a year. It saves 40%. It does come with with a bit of a caveat that you cannot just scale up and down. If you're on an F64, it's kind of, you're going to stick to it. And if you do change, it's like Vodacom, they give you like a penalty to change that. But that's really your pricing choices. So under the capacity units, the options we have, I've just placed 3 of them: the F2, the F64 SKU, the F2048 SKU. But you also get like a F4 and an F8 and an F16 depending on your environment. The cheapest one you can get, so if you go onto Microsoft Fabric now, is the F2 SKU, the smallest option. There we go, around $321. That could vary, on a pay-as-you-go. The one that Microsoft is kind of like, punting is the F64 SKU, mid-tier. It's around $6,000 a month, but it does include things like unlimited free Power BI viewing. As an example, Copilot, as I said, was only from this SKU level up, but it's now part of all SKUs as from last week, they told us. And of course, you can go right to the top, the F2048 capacity, which is the largest, around, what's that, 270,000 a month. Now, capacity, think of things like memory, input, output, processing power. It like you like pay for this capacity and then you use it across the end-to-end over here. Now that's capacity units. The final one I want to talk about is user licenses under Power BI. Now, and again, this slide and information would be available. Power BI, these are the new options. Power BI Pro, they've just upped it now to $14 per user per month. It used to be $10, starting from 2025, and it's needed for creating BI content. And everyone needs this SKU below F64. Fabric free cost, no cost. Let's use it, View Fabric, but it's only on a capacity of F64 and up if you then take that option over there. And then premium per user around 20. I believe it's $24, so that might be a correction for Premier BI, but yes, less useful in Fabric. So you can still run Power BI as a standalone with your licenses onto a Power BI service as such. And I think that wraps it up from my side. There could be more questions. So in summary, before I hand over to Stefan, that's the end-to-end Microsoft Power BI high-level overview. So I'll hand over to Stefan.
Thank you very much, everyone, for this opportunity. So what I'm going to try and do is really do a basic end-to-end analytics, meaning pulling from a source where the data is pretty messy and ending up in a Power BI report that makes sense. Now, before I start, I need to clear some a concept or misconception about, or the question rather, what is a lakehouse? I get that often when I do demos. Probably 1 out of 3 I would get the question now what is a lakehouse and what is the difference between a lakehouse and a warehouse? And that question is actually much more significant, and I will explain that right now. So when you log into Fabric, you will be, this is basically your landing page. you would have a couple of menus on the left. The one that one would go that you would use most is your workspaces, and the workspaces that's been assigned to you will show in there. To just continue of what Greg said on Entra ID, your whole security is managed within this one space. So you would only be able to see the workspaces that's been assigned to you. So typically an end user will only see your production workspaces where they can pull the reports, whereas your developers would see more of your development and UAT environments. For this exercise, I've created a demo underscore fin for financial workspace, and I have created here some items. And let's go and have a look at a lakehouse. So the first thing you need to, or the way to understand a lakehouse versus a warehouse is if you think about a material refinery, where you have raw materials that comes in from the mines that's been dumped into this one big place before it gets refined down in the process. And your lakehouse is firstly really a storage. That's the way you need to think about it. So any form of data in any type of format you can bring into your lakehouse. So let me show you over here. You'll see there's files, and I have manually brought in a couple of files. You will see there is some CSV, there's even a presentation, and there's even a PDF. I can load over here. I can do audio files, I can do normal text files, I can do Word files, I can do any type of file I can literally bring into my lakehouse. Why is that significant? Well, having your data as is without being changed in any way means you've got your source your source data as is, and then without the worry that there has been done any processing on it, so you can now do proper fresh processing on your data. The other one is that having all of these file formats here now sets you up also for future AI. So a typical use case here could be that, let's say you get a lot of purchase orders from your customers, and they come in PDF formats, and you want to automate that process, making use of AI, running through those PDFs, picking up the actual order that the customer wants to do, and then process it from there. So I'm not going to touch on the AI portion here. We may very well do a future webinar where we will only focus on the AI portion in Fabric, where we can extract data using data models, where we can put that into a data flow, where we can use all kinds of good coding in Python, which is in PySpark, in order to set you up for AI. I'm not going to touch on that portion. What I do want to show you here, as these are files, is that I have brought in some CSV files, which I'm going to use further on in order to now complete the analytics pipeline. So the other thing that you will notice is that I also have tables in my warehouse. So the idea is that you can bring in the raw data in whatever format, and then take that with whatever means. So if it's CSV, that's easy. If you need to have some form of additional power in terms of AI to convert that into information, you can now bring that in and store this as tables. And you will see there's that little triangular there that stands for delta files. So it will bring it into that format that then becomes usable. When we look now at a warehouse, just to make that difference, is that the data over here might be quite messy. And we would like to now actually clean up that data to make it usable, to show that inside of a Power BI report. So let's now look at how we would start from start to finish, where we would actually bring in that information, and then at the same time then visualize that into a Power BI report. So going back to if I can go back to my workspace, you will notice that I've got some predefined items here. Now, fortunately, this is a fairly short list, so I can quite easily see there's my reports, there's my lakehouse, my warehouse, my ingestion, but this can become quite lengthy and it can become very cluttered. And Microsoft and in Fabric has given us a wonderful way of organizing that. So I could create a predefined task flow where basically the the components that you use would be categorized. In my case, I'm actually going to just create a custom one just in order to show the basic flow. So in my first instance, I would like to just get the data. So that would be my ingestion. And for that, I can then attach my existing item, which is my ingestion pipeline. From there, I would like to put that into a lakehouse. So, and I can even go over here. Let me just put that, and I would get my lakehouse over there. Then I want to refine my data. So for that, sorry, let me just go over here. I will attach my warehouse. And then thereafter, I would like to visualize my data, which would be my Power BI report. And for that, I would attach my Power BI portions to it. And then just as a means of showing how the data would flow, I can connect these. Just take note that this does not create a workflow in any way. This is really just if somebody else needs to work on this workspace and you open up the workspace, you can very clearly see what the flow is of data from where you start to where you end, and it can become quite complex along the way. If at any point you just want to see the entire list, you will just click on the canvas on the outside and you would still see your entire list over here. So task flow is a very nice way of cleaning up your environment and present it visually of what you're doing. So let's then start with our ingestion. So if I open my ingestion pipeline, which I've pre-created, what you will notice here is that I've got 4 tasks that's running. And what I've done is I've actually went and looked at the most messy financial data that I could find. And I could actually get my hands on company data from 2016 to 2018. So that's all data. So it has no relevance. But it's from instant accounting. For those of you who know, F&B has that instant accounting for business accounts, where you can do your basic accounting. And but F&B definitely didn't write it in order to integrate with any other systems. So what I had to do was really just extract that data into a CSV file. And what I'm doing over here is in my task, in my source. And what you will notice here, my connection is my lakehouse, because I've already brought that into my lakehouse just as a file, but not as a table. And you can use data flows to bring in data. If it's just plain data, you can also create a direct connection to a database. So just here as an example, if I just for purpose of illustration, if I choose my more sources, and this is what Greg has alluded to, it will now give you all the options of different data sources that you connect to. So here at the top, you will see the basics one. If you go into more, you will see the entire list. So this is already right on the ingestion side. You can either pick up a already out of the box connector, but you also have the options to, if it's an REST API that you need to connect to, then you would simply use that connector. You can use Python. All those connectors most of the data sources, most of the used data sources are there, and even if there is not one, you can also connect programmatically in order to get that information. So that is just to show in terms of data sources. Just to complete this one here. So in this case, I would pick up my CSV file out of my directory, and then I will specify a destination where I want to put that data. And in this case, I would also always say it needs to be overridden as I'm putting fresh data in every time. And then I had to extract per financial year the detailed general ledger, and again specify my source, the tables that it needs to get in. And so now I've got 3 different financial years. So I wasn't able to pull in the total database as it was. I had to do that by year, which is very typical that we could find in real life, is that you might need to bring in different portions of data and then merge it. So once after I've run it, I would now be in my lakehouse. So there you would see my account information is brought in. There I've got my general ledger. And now let's have a look at this data. Now you would see that there's a lot of fields here that's just been repetitive, which is not something really you can use. And then some of these headings are terrible. You've got a text box 26, 27. You've got some funny descriptions over here. And as data analysts, this is not uncommon. We often get this, that we have all kinds of data that's in all different formats. That's pretty messy and that's really unusable. And to try and link your Power BI report straight to this is going to be problematic, because you actually will need to do some form of data cleaning, data merging, because you've got now 3 data sets over here. You actually want that in one, because you want to be easy. You want to be able to easily jump between your financial years, do your comparisons. So this is, as it is in its raw data, pretty much unusable. So what we want to do now is refine this data, and for that we have our warehouse. Now, to just give you an idea, if you see over here, I've got my warehouse, my tables, and you will notice that I've now added here a dimension calendar table. And the reason for that is that, especially if you've got many different data sources, but you've got one set of calendar, if you're like a group of companies, or you're bringing a lot of information in from different systems, having a single calendar where you can link it to a date that will immediately show you the period, the fiscal year, the fiscal period to it, helps you very much in order to then link the data, being actively able to compare that and then to visualize it. So in this case, I have simply created a calendar table standard for all the days for those 3 financial years. Then looking at my accounts, this was a very straightforward one, easy to just get the account ID description, my financial type, whether it's income statement, balance sheet, and then the financial category. That was a fairly easy extraction. But my general ledger created quite a bit of problems. To give you an idea here, I noticed that if I look at the debits and credits column and at the amount column in my data, that a lot of debits has been displayed as negatives. So in this case over here, all of these transactions, this one here, first of all, apologies, this one was just to show you that I had one column that had both the date and the description. And ideally, in analytics, you would like to have your date separate and then the description. The other problem I had is that, as I mentioned, in my if I compare my debits to the amount, these ones were all showing in my debit column, but it had a negative amount on my amount column. And then I had the same problem with my credits. A lot of credits were showing as positive. So in normal way, if you do financial reporting, a debit is always a positive amount, a credit is always a negative amount, and you would basically build your financial statement, balance sheet statement based on that principle, and only right at the end you'll do the sign changes. So obviously the way that they exported or made this export available, it was for their specific reporting, so it becomes a problem in order for us to have usable information. And then the other thing that I've noticed was that they even had some calculated values, like your net profit and loss, which is usually just a calculated value. They've added that as a line in, which means is that if you use that as well, you will have duplicate values in your financial statements. So how did I solve this? So well, first of all, I took the meaningful information and from all those three different sources, which was my account ID description, and I could find the amount, debit and credit. That was fortunately consistent. And for those three sources, I then pulled those three sources into a single table. Thereafter, I then created my own amount table by making use of the debit and credit field. So now I know that if I do my financial reporting, that a negative is always a credit, positive is always a debit, and I can do my reporting that way. Then I removed all those where we had the calculated values, which was unnecessary, removed those ones out of it. And then something that might seem very contrary is I have then added my calendar information into this table. And many might use, but why would you do that? You've got relationships. You've got the calendar table, and then you've got your general ledger table. Why would you bring that calendar table in? And to make it worse, I even did the same for my account information. And the reason for that is that when it comes to Power BI, you do not want to make use of relationships to get data. That adds additional processing onto your report, and in this case, it might have a little, quite a small effect. But when your report becomes huge and you've got millions of records that needs to go and fetch data from different kinds of resources, it hampers your performance tremendously. So as a rule, in order to create a proper analytical semantic model, you really want to have all your information already inside of your fact table. So that when it comes to Power BI, you literally just display that information, and the only time you would make use of your relationships is for filtering. That Power BI does excellent, so you may see now that I am preparing the data for my Power BI. It's a different concept. Usually, in most cases, you have Power BI and you try to do everything there. You try to clean up your data, put it all together, and have all kinds of very complicated DAX measures running in order to clean that up. With Fabric, we want to do most of that data processing long before it even reaches Power BI. And to complete this, I've even went as far and took my general ledger and summarized them already by period, by account, and with a sum value. Which means is that if I now go to my Power BI, I could literally just pull that information without creating any measures. And let me illustrate it to you. I can just get rid of this bar over here. So in my Power BI report, and if I would just illustrate this over here. So what I've done here simply is really just to have a visual 12-month income statement, which I can then pull by year. So this at the moment here would be my 2018. I can then also select 2016, 2017, and immediately see my graph. And what I want to show you over here, just to bring over that concept of that you want to really process all your data before you go into your Power BI, you will notice that when I, within my design of my Power BI report, that in all of this, you will not find a single measure. And that's what I was trying to achieve in this illustration, is of how you actually pick up your very, very messy data, how you would clean that up in your warehouse, and how you would display that, and how you can display that easily without creating any additional coding inside of your Power BI report. Now, given it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do, with Fabric to do measures, there is definite use cases for it. You want to avoid that as much as possible for performance sake. And the other thing is, you want to be able to verify your data before you even start your Power BI development. So having all your data that you can simply query with a SQL query, looking at it and verifying it, means that your Power BI developer would not now need to do all kinds of fancy coding in order to correct the data. The data needs to be correct before it goes into Power BI. And that basically, thank you audience, that is what I wanted to discuss. There's one final thing in order to complete this, and that is automation. So if I now go back to my ingestion line over here, I can schedule this import. And I can give it a time, and it can run daily. Typically, with many customers, that would happen. You would have schedules that run through night, so that on the day that you pull the report, you've got all the information from the back. But I can complete this, I can continue this now by adding the store procedures that I have created. And I can simply go to where that store procedure is. I can pick that store procedure up. And for some reason, it does not, it is my warehouse. Why it would fail, that is not typically just because I am doing a live demo. But in order to just complete that pictures, I can add all those store procedures that created my dimension and fact tables, put them over here, link them into the sequence, save it, and then put that into my schedule, and that way I can automate that entire process. All right, thank you very much. Gabriel, I hand over back to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you so much. And yeah, you had a good run until you finally did get bitten by the demo bug. We've got 5 minutes left of the webinar, so I'm going to take a couple of questions. Thank you for those that's posted them in the chat. The first question that came up there was, why would you store your unstructured and structured data in the file section? Stefan, I think that relates to the concept of the One Lake. Maybe you want to elaborate on exactly why people would want to store unstructured data, I think specifically in the One Lake.
Yes, so the main reason for that is if you want to make use of machine learning AI. You've got unstructured data, at least now you've got it in one space. It's indexed. You can access it through code, through your normal interface of your lakehouse, even your warehouse. And now you can take that unstructured data and convert that, refine it, merge it into structured data. At the end of the day, your Power BI report wants structured data. It doesn't know what to do with unstructured. So the whole idea is that your lakehouse becomes both a typical database with unstructured data in order that you can then pick it up from there, refine it into structured data.
Okay, great, Stefan. So I guess an example would be storing, back to the example that one of you mentioned, was to store invoices, for instance, which might come in a PDF format in your One Lake, so that you've got the opportunity to go and extract the data from that PDF-based invoice where you want to report on it. Okay, right. Excellent. And then Amy also asked a really good question. I think everybody in the audience saw that, around embedding reports into custom applications. Greg, I don't know if you want to mention anything more than your reply to Amy for Power BI embedded reports, which is the mechanism that Microsoft makes available for custom reports to be embedded in custom applications.
No, I'm good. I did reply to you, Amy.
Okay.
In the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see another question there. I'm just going to read this out. Regarding the approach to house as much data and do as much processing before Power BI, would time intelligence-based measures be in Power BI, or can you do that before you hit Power BI? I don't know, Greg, Stefan, if one of you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I'm expanding on it. You can definitely do it. So I'll just give a broader answer to that in the chat.
Okay, great.
You don't have to do it in DAX only. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And then just the last question here, just looking at the clock here before we hit on the hour. A question there from Terence with regards to licensing. If you use a F64 SKU for Fabric, will users be able to view reports for free? The question then is, what does free mean in terms of hosting the report, for instance, on your public website? So, Craig, Stefan, the Power BI free report usage, I guess those are for named internal users, just to disclaim that.
Yeah, so your F64 SKU is also premium capacity for Power BI. So that is what many would know as your P1, but that is now your F64 and higher inside of Fabric. So that means that your report distribution to internal, even out to your customers, they would not need to have a Power BI Pro license in order to consume that report. Anything less than an F64 SKU, when you want to distribute that on the Fabric platform, they would need to have a Power BI Pro license. But from F64 onwards, your consumers would not need to have a license.
Okay, great. Thanks, Terence. Power BI embedded can become a complicated conversation. So if you want to elaborate on the question directly with Stefan or Greg, just reach out to us. We're about on the hour, so I want to wrap the webinar up. I just want to start off again, thanking everybody for attending. There is some links on your screen now to either go and visit First Digital or the Microsoft Fabric landing page, or First Technology has got a weekly newsletter called Top Stories, currently also powered by AI. There's a link for that, in which we cover a lot of the major notices, especially for Microsoft in terms of licensing changes and Fabric itself. But from the First Digital team, Greg and Stefan and myself, thank you very much for attending today. And we hope to see you at a next webinar soon.
Thank you, everyone.